Hello and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for a super busy Wednesday news day, May the 28th, 2025, the fourth and final Wednesday of this month already, and a busy day on the calendar of made-up holidays as well. First off, it's World Otter Day, created to help raise awareness about the playful mammals and educate people on the otter's role in helping to maintain ecosystems. Today is also National Hamburger Day, which, you know, got its name from Hamburg, Germany, but history says the Chinese had been putting a piece of cooked meat between two pieces of toast for centuries. Wendy's, Burger King, Dairy Queen are among the many places having burger specials today. No official word from the White House if the president will celebrate with McDonald's, which we all know he loves. Today is also National Brisket Day, which is just wrong. Hello, calendar people. Brisket and the hamburger absolutely need their own individual days. You cannot celebrate hamburgers and brisket, two of the best things in the world, on the same day. The craftsmanship and the process, the preparation that goes into both of these foods, especially the brisket, obviously, deserves its own day. There are so many big headlines, as I indicated a moment ago. The U.S. Treasury reporting a 60% increase in tariff revenue as Trump's policies begin to take effect. The president offering Canada again to become the 51st state with some kind of financial deal. There's a lot of talk about that. Trump media announcing a $2.5 billion crypto deal. There is definitely going to be a lot of talk about that. And President Trump's announced pardons on Tuesday for reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley. The couple was sentenced to 12 years in prison for defrauding banks out of millions of dollars and hiding money from the IRS. Is also getting a lot of play in the news today. Trump called their daughter, Savannah, from the Oval Office yesterday.
That's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing, but it's a great thing because your parents are going to be free and clean, and I hope we can do it by tomorrow. Is that okay? We'll try getting it done tomorrow. So wonderful. Give them, I don't know them, but give them my regards and wish them a good life.
Mr. President.
Yes. How are you?
I just want to say thank you for bringing my parents back.
Yeah, well, they were given a pretty harsh treatment based on what I'm hearing. Pretty harsh treatment.
Yes, sir.
Was your brother fighting also for this release, right?
Hey, I go to the University of Alabama, and I saw you speak, and I said, that's the greatest presidential speech I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, that's good. I was just there. I gave the commencement. What a great group of people. If you were in the audience, you have to be good. What a good school it was, and I love Alabama. You know, I love Alabama. It's that school is really, that was very impressive when I was there. Yeah, I think I did a good job. I got a lot of good comments on that one.
One of their sons who got on the phone, which may have been difficult for you to hear, attends the University of Alabama, where the president recently spoke, as he mentioned. Savannah Chrisley was one of the many speakers at last year's Republican National Convention, and the pardon of her parents may be one of the items that the president is signing this afternoon. On Monday, the president pardoned Scott Jenkins, a former Virginia sheriff who was sentenced to 10 years in prison after being convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and bribery. The White House calendar says the president is signing more executive orders this afternoon. Maybe the pardons will be a part of that, and it is closed to the press, so we will not get the usual press conference at the signing ceremony that we typically see. After Trump's, shall we say, contentious meeting at the White House last week with the president of South Africa, people have been asking what's really going on in South Africa, especially since some in the media are attempting to debunk what the White House has been reporting. Well, Rob Schmitt is finding out.
All right, South African entrepreneur and billionaire Robert Hersov joins us now. He is obviously very engaged in this. You live in Cape Town. You're still very engaged. You do a lot of business in South Africa. This is your home. Your response to your president's, he continues to contend that this is just a liberation chant. It's literally kill the white farmer.
It's fundamentally evil, and it's a disgrace, and he should not be allowed to say that. 100,000 people jumping up and down with red berets, singing and chanting, and in a separate interview, that man, Julius Malema, said, "We will slit the throat of whiteness, but not yet." If that isn't hate speech, I don't know what is, but not yet.
Do you feel like your country's falling apart?
Our country is falling apart. There's economic genocide.
Yeah.
And I credit Donald Trump with using that word, which has got the left-wing media up in arms, using the word genocide. Everyone thinks genocide is linked to extermination, but there are a lot of other features that build up to genocide: racial prioritization, organization, persecution, denial.
Yeah.
And of those 10 elements, we've got about 7 ongoing in South Africa. They haven't lit the ovens yet. And if you think of that chanting by the Red Berets, kill the Boer, think of Germany in 1933. They might as well be wearing brown shirts.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I mean, the media is marginalizing this as much as they possibly can. They hate this story. They hate that Trump put a spotlight on it in front of the whole world, which he did. But flip it for a second. If you had a white political party in South Africa saying, kill the black man, I imagine that story would be everywhere.
Even in left-wing media. Especially in left-wing media. Yeah. It's horrific what's going on in South Africa. And it's the Soviet playbook, which the ANC adopted 100 years ago, that they are now instituting. And it's reached a point now where people are standing up and saying, we're not going to take it anymore. And I thank Donald Trump and I thank America for taking notice.
Because what happens? I mean, you guys become the next Rhodesia, you become the next Zimbabwe. It all collapses before they finally, before there's a wave of some kind of common sense comes back to bring the country back from the depths, right?
So that disgraceful Cyril Ramaphosa, who's just saying it's just a liberation chant, signed into law in January, listen to these 3 words, expropriation without compensation. That's a law now. Yeah. And even though they say, oh, it's never going to be used and it's only in the public interest, it's like having a loaded gun in the bedroom with children running around. Somebody's going to pull the trigger at some point.
I wonder how much longer you can continue like this and I guess the white farmers will stick around because, I mean, as we saw even in the White House meeting, they had, I think Retief Goosen was telling the story about how his family had friends that had been killed. If it's that endemic, if it's everywhere, how long are people going to sit there and wait until they get slaughtered in their own homes?
There are 30,000 commercial farmers in South Africa.
30,000.
If you take the number of farmers killed, of whom 20% of the murders have rape and torture involved. So if you take the number of farmers out of 30,000, you have 3 million commercial farmers in America. If you do that pro rata analysis, America would have had 235,000 farmers murdered between 2000 and today. Do you think the left-wing press would notice that?
I imagine they would.
South African billionaire businessman Robert Hersov on Rob Schmitt Tonight. Great stuff, great insight. And you may have also heard of another South African billionaire businessman, a guy named Elon Musk. Musk obviously doesn't live there anymore. He hasn't lived there in some time. Hersov still lives there. And we go from South Africa to Russia as I cover a wide range of topics on today's Newsmax Daily. I mean, there is a lot going on. Congress is pushing for it, and the Trump administration is now weighing additional economic sanctions on Russia for its continued aggression on Ukraine. You know, continued bombing, drone attacks, killings, and failing to agree to a ceasefire. It was the topic of discussion on National Report with Emma Rechenberg and Sean Kreisman.
KT McFarland, former Trump administration deputy national security advisor, author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, welcome. So a lot to keep in mind here. We've got Vladimir Putin firing missiles into Ukraine. You just heard from the Ukrainian president there. And then also a new headline, Germany signing off, lifting restrictions on Kyiv to fire long-range missiles into Russia. Could you talk to us about what this means for the current state of the war?
You know, to me, the most discouraging thing about the state of the war is what President Trump said over the weekend, where he said, I don't know what's happened to Putin. Is he gone crazy? Does he just want to fight forever? Maybe he really doesn't want peace. And if that's the case, if President Trump is determined, despite all of the efforts to get President Putin to the negotiating table, that Putin just wants to fight on and fight on forever, even though it's against the interests of his country, even though people are getting killed, his own people, as well as civilians everywhere in Ukraine and Russia, then it's very difficult to see how you stop Vladimir Putin under the current situation. Now, what are President Trump's options? You could do secondary sanctions. If they're really, they would be such extraordinary sanctions against Russia that Russia would have great difficulty surviving economically if President Trump were to go in that direction.
Yeah, kind of on that same, sentiment. Pennsylvania Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick is the co-chair of the House Ukrainian Caucus. He posted on X over the weekend, writing this: the United States cannot fail to respond as Putin escalates his barbaric assault on innocent Ukrainians. Congress must act immediately and decisively. We need full crippling sanctions targeting Putin, his regime, and those bankrolling this campaign of terror until the Russian war machine collapses in on itself. Peace through strength begins with action. So you talked a little bit about sanctions. Aside from the president, is there something that Congress can step up and do? Is there actions that Congress could take?
Yeah, so here's how the sanctions work. We don't trade much with Russia, so we can put sanctions on Russia. It doesn't matter much. The things that matter to Russia are, can it sell its oil and natural gas around the world? Something like 75% of its income, national income, comes from selling oil and natural gas. So Russia is prevented and banned from selling to a lot of countries, but nobody's really enforcing it. And some of the European countries like Germany, they still continue to import Russian natural gas, enriching Russia. Other countries like India import Russian oil, again, making Russia a pretty rich country because the price of oil is high. As President Trump drives down the prices of oil and natural gas because American exports come on the market, that means Putin's income is diminished. But there's another way to really cut him off at the knees, and that is sanctions imposed by Congress or with the president or in conjunction, and that is to say we will do secondary sanctions. So that means we go to any of these countries, Germany, India, and say, look, you have a deal. You want to continue to import energy from Russia, making Russia rich, or do you want to trade with America? You can't trade with both. At which point all the countries will say, well, we can't forego the American market. And so those are secondary sanctions, and that would crush the Russian economy very quickly.
Former Deputy National Security Advisor K.T. McFarland on Newsmax. On yesterday's Newsmax Daily, I featured a segment from host Bob Brooks talking about the Democrats' new plan to reconnect with young men. Codename Sam. Remember that? Again, that is why you have to listen every day. I mean, it's almost like a soap opera. If you miss a day or two, you're not going to know what's going on. Now everyone is talking about the Democrats' $20 million plan named Sam. More from Chris Salcedo.
For elections that are a year and a half away, claiming that they're right around the corner.
With the midterms fast approaching and a full 6 months after November's electoral drubbing, the Democratic Party appears to still be in fact-finding mode. The New York Times reports that party donors and strategists have been gathering at luxury hotels to discuss how to win back working-class voters. And they're spending $20 million on an effort to try to figure out how to speak to young men. Quote, it is codenamed SAM, short for Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, and promises investment to study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in these spaces.
So the Democrats have problems with talking to young men, a demographic that abandoned the party in favor of President Trump's America First message and proven track record. A Democrat former chief of staff to the White House, press office, and an advisor to the press secretary jumped on the Karl Rove Never Trump network, claiming that Democrats need new messaging and new messengers, meaning the architects of Barack Obama's vacuous hope and change 2008 campaign still run the Democrat Party today, and Obama's brand of America hatred isn't working out for Democrats. In fact, it was a bang-up job Obama and his anti-American leftists did. Under their control, the Democrat Party has turned in historic loss after historic loss as the Democrats embrace lawbreaking, anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, anti-Christianism, anti-whiteism, anti-cop, sexual grooming of children, anti-constitutional policies. But notice how no Democrat is proposing abandoning any of those policy positions. All they want to do is repackage all of it, come up with a better way to sell all of it to con disenchanted Democrat voters, specifically young men, to vote against their own best interest by voting Democrat. But why would males return to the Democrats? In 2024, the leftist party apparatchiks crammed Kamala Harris, an unqualified and nearly universally reviled candidate, down the throats of Democrat voters. The party bosses said, "You will vote for her?" Even though she earned not a single primary vote. When young men, in particular whites and Latinos, with an historic number of black men, rejected Kamala Harris as president, the left-wing press and the Democrats labeled those men misogynists and racists instead of looking at their unqualified leftist and anti-American candidate and her policies that mirrored President Autopen. The leftists in the Democrat Party blamed men for rejecting her and her vacuous, dangerous, and insane policies. Democrats don't have the conscience or the brain power to consider that maybe they are wrong, and it is they who must change. Democrats would have to believe in a government of, by, and for the people to change. Democrats no longer believe in Abraham Lincoln's American vision. But a lot of men do, and many Democrats are waking up to the fact that it was Latino men who rejected Democrats' diversity, inclusion, equity agenda, and the LGBTQ ABCDEFG cultural Marxist agenda. President Trump, with common sense and science at his back, rejected pronouns, rejected government schools undermining parental authority and pushing deviancy onto our children. It was Latinos who rejected Democrats attacking our families and bastardizing the Spanish language, all in an effort to claim that men can be women and vice versa. Men rejected allowing fake women to play in women's sports, endangering real women's opportunities and lives. You see, real men don't want to hurt women, but the Democrat Party does. That's why real men left the Democrat Party.
Your self-proclaimed liberty-loving Latino, Chris Salcedo. The Democrats' problems are only getting worse as well. According to an Insider Advantage poll of 1,000 likely voters, 59.6%. That's nearly 60% of Hispanics approve of Trump's current job performance, while 40% disapprove. A 22 percentage point increase from a poll a month ago. Trump and Republicans are continuing to gain support from Hispanic voters who traditionally leaned left, another one of the Democrats' many problems. Trump increased his share of the Hispanic vote from 16% in 2016 to 42% in 2024, and the support is continuing to grow. Back to Chris Salcedo, who also had a fantastic segment on his show about the cuts to NPR and Harvard.
Our panel, host of the Michelle Tafoya podcast, Michelle Tafoya, and actor Dean Cain. Hey guys, welcome back. Michelle, I want to start with you. The idea that any media deserves taxpayer funding is kind of ludicrous on its face, in my view anyway. It's not government's role. Where am I going wrong here?
You're not going wrong at all. I was nodding over here as you were saying that, because the lawyers for NPR are suggesting that this executive order that they are suing about is to quell free speech, is to prevent the exercise of the First Amendment by NPR and its stations. No, it's not. No, it's not. No one's asking them to stop talking or to stop expressing themselves. What they are saying is not $1 of taxpayer money should go to support that. And nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the First Amendment guarantees anybody money to present themselves. Also, you know, the act that set up the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, NPR and PBS, was like 1967. That was pre-internet, pre-satellite, pre-cellular, pre-cable. You know, we only had like 3 networks. We've come so far, virtually anyone can express themselves online, whether you like what they say or not. This is about the funding, as you've said, and there is no doubt that this is a left-leaning organization, NPR.
Dean, in the meantime, the Trump administration announcing plans to yank all remaining federal funds to left-wing Harvard University. This, of course, comes after months of violent anti-American, anti-Semitic protests across several Ivy League schools, including Harvard. Harvard was asked to comply with some of these rules being implemented by the Trump administration, and they refused to comply, but they still want taxpayer dollars. How do you see it?
Well, I went to Princeton, so I'm not a big fan of Harvard to begin with. Look, it's the same thing that Michelle was saying about NPR, which she was 100% correct on, by the way. Why do they deserve taxpayer money? If you're taking taxpayer money and federal money, then you better follow the rules. And there's no question they haven't been following the rules. They've got a $53 billion endowment, which is taxed at like 1.4%. They got 27% of their students are foreign students. They're thumbing their nose at this administration who is giving them billions of dollars. And you can't do that. If you do it, you're going to get cut.
That's right. Well, if you're going to take the taxpayer money, there's strings that come with that. That's how it works. Michelle, and about what we were talking about, the left-wing press, it doesn't need any help out there from taxpayers. You reposted on X a touching tribute to the young Israeli couple gunned down by a left-wing loon last week in D.C., and I was shocked at how quickly this and other horrific crimes committed by the left wing just get swept off of media coverage. Kind of revolting, in my opinion. How about you?
The other revolting thing was that you saw some really strong leftists go onto platforms, social media platforms, and say that this was totally deserved, that these two people were war criminals, that they supported genocide. All of those words that the left likes to try to use to pit Israel versus Palestine, completely forgetting that there was a ceasefire on October 6th of 2023, and it was broken by Hamas. And this murder of these two embassy individuals is so despicable that it happened here in America, and that some Americans are applauding it. Shows you where we are, and it is not, I don't think it's a good place.
That's the lovely and talented Michelle Tafoya, host of the Michelle Tafoya Show on the Chris Salcedo Show on Newsmax. Bianca De La Garza and judicial analyst Andrew Napolitano talked about the government funding cuts to Harvard.
So when you look at the memo here, it seems Harvard is violating. It's what it has to do to uphold and get all these federal grants. It was the Supreme Court decision rebuking Harvard's policy of discrimination, the fact that they're offering a remedial math course, and now concerns about violating Title VII Civil Rights Act and the anti-Semitism. It's a lengthy list. Will President Trump be successful in this move?
Well, partly maybe, and partly no. Let's take the no. Many of the funds that he is canceling are not with Harvard University as an institution. They're with individual professors and researchers who have nothing to do with the institutional policies of Harvard. I doubt that the court would allow him to tamper with those, because these are people who applied for these grants, qualified for them, received them, and really have nothing to do with the president's complaints about the university. His complaints about the university, unfortunately for him, have been enjoined temporarily by a federal judge until there can be litigation at which the government will have the opportunity to prove the accuracy of his complaints. That's the money side. In terms of
Let me get clarity on one of them, because I will just break it down, because there's so much, and I just want to make sure everyone's following this. To your point of that, it's individuals. How the administration, I think, is tying it back to a systemic problem they think Harvard is facilitating and fostering, which is anti-Semitism. One of the assailants assaulted a Jewish classmate in an anti-Israel protest, judge, in October 2023, has now been appointed as class marshal by the Harvard Divinity School. Alan Dershowitz on the show yesterday, very upset about this. So also 3 weeks after the other assailant gets a $65,000 Harvard Law School fellowship. So people who are doing things which are, anti-Semitic, not ethical conduct, which you have to get a grant, are in a way tied to the bigger picture here, I would think. At least that's what the administration will point to.
Those cases about which Professor Dershowitz, who of course famously taught at Harvard for many years, spoke, are easy ones for the administration to prove and prevail on. The ones that are not easy are where there are no allegations against the actual recipient of the grant. Some medical doctor working in a laboratory that doesn't even deal with students, or some researcher conducting tests on people off campus who's never physically there. Those are the cases that are going to be difficult for the government to prove.
Newsmax senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano on Newsline with Bianca De La Garza. That's at noon Eastern. Newsline at noon. Great way to get caught up on the day, maybe during your lunch hour. Let's talk about the president's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick for a moment. Another super rich guy who gives no you-know-whats. Howard Lutnick, if you don't know, was the CEO of financial firm Cantor Fitzgerald. In order to comply with government ethic rules, much like the president had to do, Lutnick has transferred ownership of shares in several companies to trusts for his adult children. He sold more than 16 million shares of Cantor Fitzgerald for $152 million. He also sold 11 million shares of a company called Newmark Group for $127 million. Now you know why Howard Lutnick is always so happy and laughing. The government ethics agreement requires officials with Wall Street ties to divest or place their holdings in a trust, which is what he's doing now. And his son or sons are taking the helm of Cantor Fitzgerald. All right, meanwhile, on Wall Street today, stocks opened slightly higher after yesterday's huge rally. And the big news on Wall Street today will be NVIDIA earnings, which will be coming out after the bell. But that's what everybody will be talking about today. And that certainly could determine which way the entire market, or at least the chip stocks, the chip sector, goes tomorrow. If you have a flight on Southwest Airlines today, listen up. Be prepared. Today is the day that Southwest starts charging most passengers to check a bag. $35 for the first bag, $45 for the second, which ends the company's long-standing tradition and advertising motto of bags fly free. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies flat, with Bitcoin down about $900, just below 109,000 this morning. Keep up with all of the news today and tonight on Newsmax, N2, and at Newsmax.com. Make sure you're streaming on Newsmax Plus as well, so you get all of your favorite shows, hosts, and expert analysis, starting each and every day with Wake Up America. Straight through Finity at 8. Greg Kelly reports at 9, Chris Plant and the Right Squad at 10. I'm Tony Marino. Enjoy the rest of your day. Eat some brisket or some hamburgers and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.